Welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. We've got Andrew Rinard here with us, and we'll kind of talk about some of the things you're doing. But welcome, Andrew.
It's good to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, I'm excited. I don't know that we've had, besides a few like Facebook messages back and forth, much of a conversation yet. But I've been listening to your podcast that you're on with another host, Get Offset podcast, and
That's the one.
yeah, and I encourage anybody who is not familiar with that show, go check them out. They're really cool. We had Emily Harris. She's also a co-host on that show. Back on this show, I guess about a year ago, give or take.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and had a really good time having her on, and I tell you what, she has like really good taste in music.
She's a whole lot to take in terms of everything involved with music. I'm still catching up. I just realized today that part of the reason why she likes the name of our podcast, which for the record, I came up with the name and then we just all decided to like it. I didn't realize that she liked how relatively similar it was to a Prince song. I'm like, wait, what? So that was my realization for the day. So
That's interesting. She actually posted something about that. I'm not a Prince fan, so please don't hate me, Emily, if you're listening to this. But I don't know much more than maybe like one or two of his top hits, and even then, like I've never really just paid attention to him. I appreciate his talent and everything, but I guess that's the way it is in the music world.
no, I like Prince quite a bit. I never really got into Prince, and that's something I should probably do at some point. But uh, yeah, I think part of what makes the dynamic for our show work really well is we're from very different parts of the musical spectrum,
Hmm.
and also from different realms of like faith backgrounds and kind of how we interact with the music industry. So there's a breadth of perspective there that I really appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's. I think makes a good mix for any show. Different perspectives,
Yeah.
and that segues right into what I'd like to talk about. A little bit about your personal journey with music, how you got interested in music, how you got started, and kind of just I'm gonna let you take the spotlight here and just fill us in on what makes Andrew Andrew, and how you've gotten to this point in your journey.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get personal. um, Man, where to begin? Well, just like uh, your average child, at one point, I was told I should learn piano, and I was elementary school, and I tried my darndest. And when I say I tried my darndest, what I really mean is we got a piano. My mom tried to sit me down and teach me the notes, and I made it to about learning. I think it was the E note. We were starting at C. We didn't even start at A. I think learning at the E note, I gave up. So that was a promising start to what seems like an unlikely continuation of my love and pursuit of music. Uh, yeah, that was a very strange. It's one of those moments where I really wish I had taken that more seriously, and now I'm awful at piano. I wish I'd learned at that time. um, but it was a start. It's a start to a journey, and oh my goodness, what a journey it has been, full of all kinds of surprising and unexpected twists and turns, which likely are a lot more exciting to me, having lived through it, than anybody else. So I'll try to make this as exciting as it could possibly be for my very boring life. Um, let's see here. Next stop along the road, we've got the noisemakers. I the first instrument I really got into is drums. So I remember it was middle school, and my parents got a tax return, and usually they did something like get a new computer, or like just that was like the one time a year for a
Hmm.
large major purchase. We didn't have tons of money growing up, and that was the year that they decided that they wanted to give music another shot in the house. But piano obviously hadn't caught on, and it kind of just turned into a way to scare the cats. The cat was doing something that it wasn't supposed to be doing, just banging on the keys.
Hmm.
Meow. Um, but yeah, they decided we're gonna give it another shot, and I had been practicing with a neighbor. Neighbor we were really close to was giving me free drum lessons, and I'd been doing it for like 6 months, and just beating on textbooks and using that as a practice pad. And they're like, all right, well, we're gonna get you a drum kit. They got my brother a guitar, and that's what I laid into, and I really just I put a whole lot of work into that, and that's when I really started to fall in love with music. That's when I had my first garage band. Was middle school, which was really just me and a buddy, and we wrote a couple of really terrible songs. I remember he had like an Ibanez RG something. He brought over with a Line 6 Spider 3. And we would just turn everything up to 11, and I would sit in the drum kit and just get really loud. And yeah. So we'd play like Nirvana covers or yeah, it was a trip. We do Nirvana covers, we do like church band cover stuff because we both ended up in a youth band.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that was the middle school years is where it all began. I also, during that time when I wasn't behind the drum kit at church, I was behind the soundboard. Good old analog Mackie soundboard.
Oh man, that's the first like board I was ever familiar with too.
Oh yeah, every time I see one, it's just like, oh, hello there, my old friend.
Yeah, they
I swear,
I forgot
every
the model
church
number.
in the 2000s had it. Yeah,
Like the VLZ, SRM or something. I don't know, something like that.
I couldn't tell you. I could identify it by the color of the knobs though. It's like that weird green and yellow.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just got super into it. This is the fun part, as I had an iPod, and my mom said only Christian music. It should the time like it was only Christian music and country, because as we all know, country does not have any illicit themes whatsoever. I say that in full sarcasm.
Yeah. No, I get it. I
Don't
get
me
it.
wrong, I love you some country, but I was like, Mom, in retrospect, so like, what's going on there? But no, so I had like Clint Black and Garth Brooks, and then I also had like some Switchfoot and Reliant K. Was when my parents really decided to let me open up a little bit into the big wide world of music. What my mom had no idea though is that my dad, who grew up in San Francisco area, and my parents are fairly young. But he grew up through the beginnings of grunge. He was in high school for, and he had all of his grunge CDs, the good old CD-ROMs for those of rest in peace. And so he loaded up a whole bunch of Nirvana and Soundgarden and Jane's Addiction, and all kinds of good stuff on my iPod. My mom had no idea for years. I think it was at least 2 or 3 years before she realized that. Every time I put in my headphones, I was like, Reliant K is great. I'm gonna listen to me some Kurt Cobain. It was just a mix across the spectrum. Yeah. She had no idea. Pearl Jam, and so I would just put in my headphones. I blast. I would just play through the entire Bleach album on drums, because Dave Grohl is a monster on that album of just pure energy. I don't care how simple it is. It's just raw energy, and I loved it. So yeah, that was kind of where things really started to explode for me. I joined the jazz band my freshman year of high school, and that became something I did all 4 years, which is really exciting.
Now, because we were talking earlier before I pressed record, I missed a lot of really great conversation. You were talking about you were born out in Nebraska, but as a small child moved to South California, correct?
Well, there's a couple of stops in between there. So this is a bit of a bit to wrap my mind around here. So I was born in Nebraska. 6 months later, I moved to Australia.
Wow.
A couple years later, we moved to England. And that's about as early as I do remember my childhood was England. I don't remember Australia, but I do remember England. I went to primary school, and then went in the year 2000. So after Y2K, we moved to Southern California. And Southern California is where I really fell in love with music. But there was a couple of stops there. And the reason for all of that is my dad was in the Air Force. He's now retired. Thank him for his service. Yeah, great guy.
Awesome. I am really surprised that you didn't have a stop down here in the South, because we have several Air Force bases along the Gulf Coast and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, how you never have been down in this region.
I haven't. I need to.
Yeah.
I've met all kinds of folks from down in your neck of the woods just from being an Air Force brat. But yeah. So anyway, so that's what we did. And then the reason why we didn't end up down in your neck of the woods is the job that my dad worked. There's only a few different bases he could work it at.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up at in California for three tours in a row. So we were there for 11 years. So that's the majority of my childhood. It's a very strange, very non-standard military brat experience, which for the record, military brat is an endearing term. That is not a derogatory term. I wear that proudly. So we were in California from 2000 to 2011. And that's where I started to pick up drums towards the end of my time there. When I was in high school, I was really into cross country and track. I got super injured, and it became apparent that was just not going to be a part of my future anymore. And so I was super bummed out. And part of how I dealt with that is I also started to pick up the guitar. So I grabbed, my dad had a Yamaha FG series from the 90s. I forget. I want to say it's like FG, like 310, something like that. Just a laminate dreadnought, big beefy kind of deal with impossibly high action. But my dad taught me a few chords. I just started picking it up, and I found that as a drummer, it was really exciting to feel like I was playing a real instrument.
Yeah.
No, I found that I really enjoyed it, and so my senior year, end of my junior year of high school, actually, we moved to Germany in 2011, and I started really taking the guitar a lot more seriously there, because when we moved there, the house we lived in, we were really close to our neighbors. I couldn't really go crazy on the skins anymore. Where we were in California, none of the neighbors cared, and so I could play, I think, till like 5 or 6 p.m. before the neighbors wanted me to settle down. So I had to tone that back, so I started leaning into guitar quite a bit more, and then I moved to college, and I couldn't bring the drum kit. Just brought the guitars with me. At that point, I had the acoustic, that Yamaha that I inherited from my dad, and then I had also bought my first electric guitar in my senior year of high school. I brought that with me to college, and that was a modern Player Series thin line Telecaster with 2 P90s, which I still have.
That's also, that's a really interesting choice, kind of as a first electric too, I think, because a lot of guys, that's not their first foray, is playing into P90s.
Honestly, I didn't know what I was looking at. I had no idea what P90s were. What I knew is that it looked great. I always liked the idea of a semi-hollow for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what my reasoning was at the time, but I just remember looking at it and thinking, wow, that's great. So I ordered it. I ordered from Musician's Friend. It took like 8 weeks to get overseas, because when we were in Germany, we had a U.S. postal address.
Mm-hmm.
It was an APO box, but it always took like 4 to 6, sometimes 8 weeks. I think waiting for the guitar was like 6 to 8 weeks. It was agonizing. So I ordered it in January, didn't get it till March. But yeah, I love that guitar to pieces. That one's name is Ashley, and that is a guitar I never plan on selling.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so I got to college, and this is where things go from I'm just having fun to maybe I want to start doing something with this. Maybe I need to start branching out and getting pushed. And so I took some theory classes, and that really revolutionized how I looked at music. Learned how to read music, which is just mind-blowing for me. And the most important thing, the big turning point for me is the church I started attending when I was in college, the worship leader, his name is Ethan Dupree. I turned up, and bless his soul, I don't know what he was thinking by letting me play, but I brought my guitar, which I love the guitar, nothing wrong with it. I had a Orange Crush 15-watt little solid state amplifier with an 8-inch speaker in it that just sounded awful, but I thought it was the coolest thing. And then an SD1 and a Metal Zone.
Oh man.
Oh no, sorry, not Metal Zone. It was a Digitech Grunge,
Okay.
which is worse
Yeah,
than a
yeah,
Metal
yeah,
Zone.
yeah.
And I was so excited to play for this church. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. I could play power chords. Because honestly, I was a terrible guitar player at that point. I haven't gotten a whole lot better, but I was really bad then. And I vaguely remember the look on Ethan's face is like, okay, well, are you sure you want to play that? We've got an amp in the back if you want to play that one instead. It's a bit bigger. And it's like, no, this one sounds like a tube amp. I don't know what was in the water in LA, which turns out there's a lot of things in the water down there. But something to convince me that this thing sounded great. So the worship leader let me play, and Ethan very judiciously but carefully started poking my buttons. He's like, "Hey, have you thought about maybe getting a delay pedal? Have you considered maybe leaving the grunge at home? That might not be the most appropriate sound." And he worked really hard to make sure that I had parts that worked with the song arrangements and to make sure that I felt included. And he mentored me, and he started teaching me exercises and things that I could be doing better. And then with a year into this venture playing at this church, I sold that amp, and I actually got a 5-watt tube amp. It was a little Randall tube amp, so way too much gain on tap for what I needed, but it did have a decent clean sound. I've since modified that amp to have a lot less gain. But so I moved into tube amp. I got a full drive 2 and a Nova delay, or a Nova repeater rather, and a small clone chorus, and so that became my new little pedal board. And
what year were you, like, around? What time is this?
This would have been 2013, 2014.
Okay.
About 5 years ago.
Okay.
When I got my first real pedals. And I started learning my scales. That was also about the same time I started taking theory. It was my second year at college. So I started learning my scales, and I started learning how all my equipment worked together, and realizing that I should probably look into isolated power, especially with the P90s. Good gravy. They're super noisy. As a side note, I cannot wait for Curtis Lamberton to finish his R&D on a silent P90 set. So Curtis, if you're listening to this, please help brother here. I can't wait to my telly. But yeah, it just kind of kicked off what turned into an avalanche of me sinking my teeth into the world of effects and tone, and taking all of that not just seriously, but professionally, and really caring about it, which is what it was. I very much had a punk rock, like, yeah, well, I can make anything sound good. It's just distortion and power chords and angst. A lot of teen spirit. That's all I needed, that's one way to approach music, but I don't know. Something changed around that point in time. I started listening to a wider variety of bands. I used to be super snobby, and I hated all pop music and basically anything that wasn't grunge or metal or anything that just was super angsty. And I started listening to pop music. I'm like, oh, not all of it. I mean, a lot of it's trash, but not all of it is. It just really expanding my horizons on what I appreciated, what I could learn from. Started pulling themes from different genres in my playing. I started the flip game. My goodness, once I started flipping pedals, it was all over. I hear that cocaine is supposed to be really addicting, and I believe people who've done it. I haven't, but I've got to tell you, if I had to guess, flipping pedals is way more addictive. It's like, oh, I could flip that pedal for $20, and then I could use that money, and I could get this other thing. But then, oh, wait, no, there's a good deal on this pedal instead, and I could flip that for $45. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that's like a really cool point. But like, when it comes to pedals, it's just endless sea of options, and it's easy. Like, okay, you flip through Instagram and you see somebody's board or whatever, and like even if you're like all set and like happy with your board, like you see something, oh, I want to try that, and
Right.
it's very I don't know, it's like a low barrier to entry. I think compared to like, oh, I'm gonna buy this new $3,000 guitar or something like
Right.
that. Like it's easy to go back and forth and try different things, and if you can sell a pedal and get another pedal, and it's easy to move between pedals like that. And so it I think it's,
Oh yeah.
yeah, for a guitar player it's a lot of fun to you know just see what's out there.
Oh, definitely. Well, and so this is about the point of time where reflecting on my story. I'm not really sure how this all happened.
Hmm.
In it, like moment by moment, I know that I was really invested playing with this church, and I think along my musical career, my playing style grew and improved the most while I was playing with Ethan at that church. Just in general, my time playing at that church was just super huge for me. I don't have a lot of milestones specifically during that time. It's a snowball effect. It kind of just
Mm.
swept me up and took me along for the ride. And in the middle of all of that, I found myself just in love with the self expression of all of it. I found myself in love with the history of pedal building and finding myself reading random forums on who these different people are and like the legend of Robert Keeley and Mike Piera and all of this kind of stuff. Uh, and, I, and then through all of that nerddom, and which wasn't too far out of character for me. I was the kid who would read the musician's friend catalogs that we would get in the mail on the toilet. That's something I would just like flip through. And I didn't even play guitar at that point in time. I just found myself just reading and wanting to know about the gear. Uh, and so when I was an adult and had little bit of money to play with and access to Craigslist in a big city like LA, where there's constantly things that you can buy on the cheap on Craigslist, um, it just all blossomed in the right kind of ways.
Yeah.
Um,
At this point, you
and
were where?
so at this point, I was still living down in LA.
Okay.
This would have been right about the time I would have been graduating undergrad. So 2015, 2000. I graduated in 2015. I briefly lived in Seattle for like 4 or 5 months, and then moved back to LA. So my last year in LA, I worked at Guitar Center because when you get a degree in youth ministry, you either work at a church or you work in fast food or retail. And I worked in retail. Uh,
So you were you majored in youth ministry, but along the way you were talking about the theory, and
yeah, so
yeah.
I'm all over the map here. There's just so many things that happened in the last decade. So I started to pursue a minor in music, and I gave up on it partway through school just because of the requirements for it. And there's some classes I didn't feel interested in taking,
Hmm.
but I did get through a couple levels of theory and really thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can
uh,
relate
it-
to that. That this something that's similar in my journey is I started out as a music major for a few semesters in college. I think it was a year and a half or something like that. And anyways, that unlocked a world of I guess knowledge, and maybe you feel the same way possibly. Um, and I didn't realize that at the time. It seemed like a lot of um, very mundane things, but like later on, when you get the experience of playing live and playing with other people, some of that stuff starts to make sense. And
mhm.
especially for me, the vocabulary of I've played with a lot of people who they are trying to express like an idea of this is what I'm shooting for, and they can't express it really. And like I
Mhm.
found that like like just the theory classes and taking some of that formal education helped give me like a vocabulary that I didn't know existed beforehand. So like it's easier to talk to musicians and explain, hey, this is what we're going for here. And the only thing is sometimes when you're playing with people who don't know those terms, it can kind of be a little problematic because what does that mean, you know? But I think it's like one of those things that like it adds tools to your toolbox, and
Oh,
that
absolutely.
like you can impact later and use.
Oh yeah, I remember. Oh, I remember learning modes, and that blew my mind. Uh, and yeah, my theory teacher gave us an assignment to write a good sounding progression in Locrian, and I just couldn't do it because that's just the most ridiculous mode. But just like Lydian is so much fun. My goodness. Um, No, I
Yeah,
remember getting. I totally resonate with that as I started to learn that, and I cert by no means have mastered any of that. Um, but having that in the back pocket, like, wait, what if we experiment with this a little bit, just in the way that I songwrite or the way that I play with other folks, is just always super neat to have.
yeah, that's awesome. I don't know that I ever got into the modes thing too much with what I was studying, but I really wish like I had a Chris Bellamy. He's a amazing guitarist, and we had him on the show a while back, and he was
Hmm.
talking about how any guitar player, like if they could take and be willing to like take jazz lessons and
Hmm.
learn how to riff in some of those modes like that, just on the fly, that like you could improvise a whole lot better with that knowledge. Take off. Oh, okay. This song is written in this mode. Okay, I'm gonna take off and just learn how to improvise in that parameter. And it's a lot easier. You think about it that way than just somebody riffing away on the pentatonic scale,
Which is still mostly what I do, anyways.
which what most of us do.
Guilty as charged. Um,
Well, going back to
but
your journey, so you were working at Guitar Center in L.A.
yeah, I worked at the Pasadena Guitar Center location.
Okay.
So store 125 for all of you who, if you're listening to this and have worked at or do work at Guitar Center, that's the store number. And yeah, so that's I worked there for a year. It was a very strange and I think a very necessary, a very necessary step for me to take because I showed up and I thought I thought I knew a lot, and I knew some, and but I think I showed up and getting to talk to the guys in the pro audio department and like one of the guys that's been there for forever. His name's Patrick, and then talking to the tech guys that were working at the tech bench and just soaking all of it in and realizing, oh my goodness, I've barely scratched the surface. I've been flipping pedals and I've been playing a lot and playing for a couple different churches and just having a ball with it. I just got done with a metalcore project I was a part of, which was really embarrassing. That we sounded awful. I enjoyed it. I loved every last second of it. But going back and listening to videos, I just cringed just a little bit. Like, oh, Andrew, what were you thinking? It certainly didn't help that I was playing my guitar with P90s in a metal band with tons of gain. As you can imagine, that a lot of noise involved there.
Yeah. Was it like a swarm of like bumblebees and
Not quite
chainsaws?
that, not quite that bad. It was definitely like the punchy in the gut kind of screamo. Um, I don't want to scare the neighbors, so I won't actually scream. Every once in a while, I'm known to do it still to reach down deep into my roots and let out a guttural scream. But yeah, so yeah. Anyways, I was in the screamo band, and I left the band and I started working at Guitar Center, and I just learned so much about the whole process of music from front to bottom. I think the department that I spent the most time trying to learn in was the pro audio department, and learning about different mics and recording techniques. And it was right about this point in time where I started discovering the joys of YouTube. And that pedal show is probably the show that one of the most informational shows for me, and as well as inspirational. Dan and Mick are just great people, as far as I can tell in the show. And so that year was super crazy for me. It just kind of turned everything over in my head, and it was like, oh, you think you know what you're talking about? Yeah. And I didn't think that was going to happen at Guitar Center of all places. I know everybody gives Guitar Center a really bad rap for like, oh, they don't know anything, and Guitar Center employees are dumb. And I've met some Guitar Center employees that fully 100% deserve that stereotype. But they're the people that I met who had been working there and just unbelievably know more than both of us combined. I mean, just their ability just to play and their knowledge of gear and history. It was amazing. Just when things would slow down the story, like, hey, so what about this? What do you know about that? Oh, well, let me tell you about that. And it was just, oh my goodness, it was really fun. I really enjoyed how much I got to learn working there and soaking it all up, and just being, honestly, just embracing the forced humility that came with it, realizing how little I knew.
Well, that's interesting. I can't only imagine, because we're fixing to turn the page here, and I want to ask you about this company that you're involved with.
Yeah.
How that played a part in shaping kind of your focus and what you're going after there with FoxChirho.
Yeah, so using Guitar Center as my transition there is working sales. I got a good feel for what people are looking for and in certain pieces of equipment. And I turned out to be a pretty decent salesman. I pretty regularly hit the I was doing at least $350 an hour sales for the most part, and I had a few months where I went over 500 average for the month. I think the best month I hit, it was at like $520 an hour average. And so it was selling so much. I got a good feel for customers in the guitar industry, and from everything that I learned while I was there, of like what companies have done well and what companies have failed and why. Getting to hear about some of the back end of stuff, talking to the managers about contracts, and like the reason why Rickenbacker wasn't carried at Guitar Center for the longest time, and that kind of stuff. It sparked this idea of like, oh, like there's a whole lot going on here. This is an entire industry. This isn't just like a little hobby shop. Like there's maybe not billions, I don't know, certainly millions and millions of dollars involved in this industry. And that was just kind of blew my mind. And then I started having the audacious thoughts of, well, how can I fit into this industry? What can I do here? And I've got an entrepreneurial sort of spirit at the core of who I am, and just the idea of wanting to take my ideas and make them real, and kind of putting them out there and seeing if other people like them. And it sparked, and so all the gears started turning. And so for a little bit there, I was looking at modding pedals and what does that look like. And so like I brought, well, I didn't buy it. My lovely wife bought me Brian Wampler's, what's the name of the book? One of his books on modifying pedals. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. And I read that thing cover to cover, and it's all highlighted with all kinds of notes. And I came to the conclusion that the pedal industry itself with pedal builders is fairly saturated. And as much as I love the idea of wanting to get in and to do modifications, kind of like what Loophole or Nose Pedal does, or maybe wanting to try and create my own overdrive to get started with something original. What I realized is there's so many people that are doing phenomenal jobs, and I just don't think that that's my wheelhouse. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can catch up to that level, and so I gave up on it. It just, something about that didn't click with me, and I didn't feel like I had something to offer that someone else didn't. And so I started mulling around on maybe what else I could do just as a project. And the podcast actually came up sort of around the same time that I started my research and development for this. But I got the idea of pedal toppers because part of who I am is I'm an artist at heart as well, and I was the kid in the back of class who was doodling. I just, like, in college and in high school, I have to doodle to be able to pay attention. Mm-hmm. Just mindlessly drawing and having a whole lot of fun with that. And so the artistic in the classical sense of the word, with the like drawings and paintings and all of that, is something that I really enjoy. And so it's like, okay, well, how can I incorporate that into a pedal topper? And at this point in time, I was looking at other companies that had done pedal toppers, and the only material that I'd really seen used was wood. And wood is great, but the complaints that I heard from folks are that they can be a little expensive, or the wood topper can be a little slick. The getting custom work done for a custom wood topper is very understandably, it's pricey, and it's a quality product. I'm not going to knock the quality of the product that some of the companies have put out. It's great stuff. It's just the price point for something that doesn't impact your tone seemed very inaccessible for a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. And so I started brainstorming on what are the different things that I can do to shake up the design of what a pedal topper is, and how I can make that more accessible for the average musician, how I can make it more functional. How can I make it more customizable was one of the things I looked into and wanted to make happen. And so thus started what seemed like a very nonsensical journey of, hey, sweetie, so I'm going to go to Home Depot. I probably won't spend that much. And coming home with like $50 of materials just to play around with and to figure out what I can work and make happen. I went through, I'm not going to lie and say I went through like 30 different prototypes and make it sound like I spent ages and ages. But I probably started maybe around this time last year, actually. Yeah, a little bit before. And I went through maybe 6 or 7 different combinations of different materials and different methods. And probably by around June. No, June I was down to what became the second to last prototype for the design. But the idea of the design comes down to a few different aspects that I think really make it stand out, and that make me proud to say, yeah, I'm the guy who does FoxChirho. Like, this is my product. I stand by it. I think it's a really great tool for musicians. It's not just an art piece. There's so much more to what this is what's going on here. So for starters, one of the things that I picked up on from my past of growing up in Southern California is I grew up skateboarding. It was all skating and surfing. I wasn't great at surfing, and I certainly wasn't great at skateboarding, but I did enjoy it. And grip tape is something that's on every single skateboard, and I am very familiar with. It's a love-hate relationship with grip tape. And so that's incorporated in my design, and the design's kind of centered around this idea of a printed grip tape. And so that makes me so happy to be able to incorporate that as a material in the design, because that's very much a part of who I am. And that just makes it so much more personal for me. But that also addresses something that I've heard a number of times is other toppers in the market. They're just very slick, and sometimes things get sweaty on stage, or you're not always wearing shoes that are going to be grippy on that. I mean,
right.
Don't get me wrong. I love like all the hipster boots. I've got a pair of leather boots in my closet that are very Uh, you 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 would expect me to be wearing a V-neck and some skinny jeans and a felt fedora, saying "Lift up, shout of praise" or
Yeah.
something like that. Something with an Australian
P-dubbing very
accent,
hard, right?
right? But they're slick shoes,
Yeah.
and there's nothing like there's. It's so awkward when you're partway through a swell and your foot slips and oh, whoops. And we all kind of laugh it off. And it's not like that's the end of the world, but it's not the most convenient thing. So that's why it's the twofold part of why I chose grip tape is it's very functional and it's very much a part of who I am. And it just felt like the right call. Excuse me.
Not a problem.
So that was the starting point. The customizable part of all of it. I realized very quickly that I was going to have to teach myself graphic design, which was frightening on so many levels for me. Because for starters, I might be artistically inclined in the sense that I like to doodle, and I've got a decent if you tell me like to sketch something out, I can kind of get it to look like it right off the bat, and with some refinement, I can get it looking kind of decent. But graphic design with the concept of I didn't realize that there's a difference between Illustrator and Photoshop, like with vector design, and started to get, and I just felt like I had opened up a Pandora's box of, well, this could go wrong and this could go wrong, and I have no idea what to do here, and I got the programs and I started toying around with it, and I made it happen. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, was learn Adobe products. There was a graphic design program at my high school that I didn't end up being a part of, but I loved the people that were in it. And I so badly wanted to look at the toolbar on the left side of the screen and all the random icons and say, what do those do? I want to know what's going on here. And I just felt so lost in the program anytime I was hanging out with friends and watching them do stuff.
Right.
So it was really, in a roundabout sort of way, really gratifying for me to have the program and to go on YouTube and start teaching myself how to do all this and just setting aside dedicated time. I don't know what I'm going to do in Illustrator today, but we're going to do something here. It's not good. It's probably not going to look good, but my goal is to learn a new function. And so within a few months of playing around with that, I got a hang of the function. I'd started making some stock art designs. I figured out the function of with vector artwork where you can get it down to the measurements in the printing process and getting it to scale for the pedal topper and hammering out that side of things. And so through the process of all of that, I am at the point where I can happily say I can provide a couple of different ways. I've graphics in a couple different ways. I've got some stock designs, and I like my stock designs, and there will definitely be some more coming in the future. After the relaunch kicks off, I'm kicking off with I think 5 or 6 stock designs for the Ernie Ball volume pedal, and I like them. If nothing else, so they're an idea of what can be done to give you an idea of the sky is the limit. Because this is a printed solution on synthetic materials, you're not limited to just the aesthetic of wood. I can do a wood, and it doesn't look 100% as good as some of the wood toppers out there. If that's what your shindig is, I can get it close. If what you really want is wood, by all means, stop listening to me. Go. There's plenty of companies that do that really well. But you name a background, I can make that happen. An idea, a texture, or something that you want to have done. The other options is you can provide a logo. And so what I've done for a few folks now is they send me their band's logo or their church logo, and as long as I've got permission from the original artist or whoever holds the rights to the art, I can reproduce that. Which means, for instance, there's a band out in the Midwest, and I did pedal topper for them, and it's their band logo with a reference to their cover art for their album, and they were so incredibly happy to be like, this is great. This is helping us express who we are as a band. This is giving us a more continuous overall look for who our band is and getting our logo all over our stuff. So the idea is with all of that, the sky is the limit. I want people to be able to put whatever art they want or need or any way they want to express themselves on their volume pedals, their expression pedals, their wah pedals, their boss pedals. I mean, wherever a topper can be fit on the pedal board, it's an opportunity to be a canvas for people to help express themselves.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
I know it sounds like it's a little vain to be like, well, I mean, it's just artwork and that's not serving a functional purpose with the tone, which we'll get in a couple of the other, or probably my favorite function with the pedal topper design in a second. But the idea is, no, it's not going to affect. I'm not telling anyone that this is going to make your tone sound better. That's ridiculous. But we're also kidding ourselves if we're saying that self-expression isn't a huge part of why we all do what we do with music.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a key part, from the clothes that we wear to the color guitar that we choose. I mean, to even just the level that some people go to coordinate a color-themed pedal board, which so much respect for. I love it. And we're kidding ourselves if we try and say, well, the aesthetic doesn't matter so much. And I think it very much does. I think that this provides my platform for pedal toppers provides another spot within this whole creative process for people to express themselves, which is why the tagline I've got is "Express Yourself." Is a neat little pun slash part of why I do what I do. I think I really enjoy it for my sake in putting different toppers on my pedal board, and I know other people have enjoyed that as well. And then the other option for art is you can commission me to do artwork, and I'm hammering out the final details for the relaunch on how I'm going to bill for that. I want to keep that as absolutely cheap as possible for folks, but I also only have so many hours in the week that I can budget out for this kind of thing. And so I hadn't been charging for artwork up through the new year. And so I did quite a few custom pieces for a handful of folks that didn't charge anything for the process of the artwork. But that also bit me a couple times. I go two different designs that I went through the process of custom designing. And I just like, oh, what do you think of this? And I send a render back, and either no response or, oh, I'm not really interested anymore, which is totally fine. It's a super bummer for me to sink a ton of time into this. And so I'm trying to figure out a way that's not taking time from people who are waiting in line for custom artwork who really want it. And so I'm sorting out the final details of that.
Yeah, that's very good. I had that discussion on the last episode with Mike Copeland.
With Mike, yeah, because he's got his tier system, which is super neat.
Yeah, he basically, for anybody who hasn't listened to that yet, it's basically, he was talking about making all these pedal mods and stuff, and he would spend so much time trying to figure out, can I do this mod, and then like he'd get back to the person and, no, I'm not interested in that, or the cost would like outweigh what it was worth, and
right.
And it's like, to make the decision that, no, this is what I'm going to offer, and this is, what I'm going to do, and streamline thing. It like really helped him kind of hone in on, this is the direction of the business, that he wanted to go.
No, and absolutely. And it's definitely a fine line. And I've tracked down and had conversations with a lot of graphic designers where the custom side of is literally what their day in and day out is, and had conversations with them on what their billing process looks like and what that balance is of making sure that your business needs are taken care of, and that the time, what I care about honestly mostly is less about my business needs. I should care about that more than I do, honestly. I've been playing it very fast and loose. But what I really care about is I would hate when I've got 3 or 4 people asking for me, which is asking for me to do a custom piece, and I've got to go with the first person in line. And if they come back and say, "Oh, sorry, I'm not interested anymore," I feel super bummed out because there's other people that are waiting, and I'm the kind of person that wants to make everybody happy. That just super bums me out.
Yeah. I think that's like that's kind of part of the process. Like we're talking about musical journeys is kind of figuring out what you want to be and how do I what's my purpose in this industry and how do I offer that and in a presentable way, and so I think that's all like part of the journey.
It's part of the journey. It's part of the hustle. It's just part of running a business and making friends and connections. And this whole year has been such an incredible learning experience for me. And I think that's been a theme of my musical journey is different chapters of learning experiences.
Yeah.
So we chapter one of with the piano of I should have learned but I didn't, and then the chapter of drums where I learned what the concept of energy and the angst and the pure raw emotion in certain genres of music, and especially how that's expressed with drums of just how purely raw being a drummer is. I love that aspect of it, and I learned so much there. I'm moving on to learning what it means to play more appropriately to what the genre is in the venue, and to kind of be more flexible into moving into a stage of just learning so much about the gear itself. And now I'm in the stage of learning about the music industry as a business, but also just as a lifestyle and a community. And it's been what it means to run a business, what it means to interact with customers and provide good customer service, and what the process of research and development, and what point do I have to learn things on my own? At what point do I reach out to people that I trust in the community, be like, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing, help.
Totally.
Man, if Curtis Lamberton has been phenomenal, a phenomenal help to me over the last few months of me calling him up at random times. Hey, because we're both in Washington State, so I've picked his brain a whole lot about what it looks like to run a business in Washington State, and me putting together my long-term business plan of making sure I'm not screwing with tax laws or trying to circumvent anything.
Yeah.
It's been a year of learning what it looks like from this perspective in the music industry, not just as a consumer, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give back, and I'm trying to offer something that is helpful for folks. To contribute back to this community that's been so incredibly kind to me. And that's been a massive part of my growth and experience as not just as a musician, just as a human.
Yeah. Well, talking about that community, there's another layer going on, and I want to ask you about this and have you kind of just tell us about the podcast you're on as a co-host. Get Offset. Kind of walk us through what your journey's been there, and kind of the maybe the opposite side of the community.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to get into that real quick before we move on. The last thing that I want to talk about with the pedal toppers is I totally want to on a rabbit trail there, but I do want to mention my favorite feature. This is going to sound super weird, but my favorite feature of the whole design is something that a lot of folks find out after, don't know about, or they find out even after they order, oh wait, it does that. Is all of my pedal toppers glow in the dark.
Sweet.
And that sounds super childish and super silly, and honestly, that's part of why I did it in the first place, was because let's just do glow in the dark. That sounds like fun. With the materials I was playing with, it just became a convenient part of the process. And through the process of that, it was realizing that no, this is actually really helpful for folks who play on dark stages where the lights are going on and off. That's just super helpful. And it's not the first time that glow in the dark has been incorporated with pedals before. My favorite distortion pedal I've got is a Proco Rat 2 from the 90s, and that's glow in the dark. And that was part of what gave me the nod to maybe I should keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just super helpful for when you're on stage and you're trying to look for it. And I can't tell you how many times I'm scrolling through forums and I'll see a VP Junior with bright neon orange tape all over it. just for the same reason of it just makes it easier to find on a dark stage. So that's the feature that not a lot of folks know about. That's the one that I love so much, just as a fun. If you just play at home, shoot, that's just fun and funky. And uh, I've got a couple of pedals sitting next to my bed. I'm on a board, and every night I turn out the lights and I see them glowing in the dark. It just makes me smile a little bit before I fall asleep. So it's super dorky. I don't even care. I'll own that 100%. It's satisfying my inner 4-year-old.
No, that's really cool. That's obviously something. I don't do a lot of playing in the dark, but I can imagine it's pretty daunting when you got a pedal board and it's having things that help you visually, you know what's there, kind of like the back of your own hand, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, and that's why all of my pedals have a white, or my pedal toppers have a white border
Hmm.
for the large format pedals, is because not only are you going to see where the pedal is, but if you see the border, you're not going to accidentally knock into a knob or a switch that's nearby with how cramped some of our pedal boards can get. So that's the idea there. And
Cool.
then no matter what the design is, the default is no matter what, you will always at least have that white border. So if you want to go for something darker that doesn't glow very well, you will still have that border to help keep you on track. So, but yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to say about that. That always seems to be the thing that gets left to the end. And I've had a couple of times where customers, I think one person like it arrived and they like, wait, this glows in the dark. Did you know about that? I forget to tell people. I want that to be more of a selling point because I think it's so rad. But yeah,
Well, cool, cool.
so that's that. But yeah, let's get into the podcast. What do you want to know?
Well, I kind of want to know about the idea behind it and how that evolved and to kind of pulling the trigger and going for it and kind of what that journey's been like for you, you know, in the process.
Good gravy. So so the journey begins with a large Facebook group that I moderate with a team of other folks who are all phenomenal folks, and that's Worship Guitar Sounds
Okay.
on Facebook. And so I've been moderating that for a couple of years now, and one of the other moderators in the group was like, "Hey, would you like to be on my podcast?" And for those of you who don't know, that's Sack Saucier. And I was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
sure. What is your pod? I didn't know you were in a podcast." Well, we haven't started it yet. We're just looking for like a couple of hosts to kick a couple of interviewees to kick off with, and we want to talk about women in the industry, and that's about what we've got so far. Okay, well, yeah, let me know and what you want me to do, or I don't know. By the way, when you say we, who's this we you speak of? And so the other person in the equation is Emily Harris, who we've talked about briefly so far, who is a huge Prince fan and who happens to live out here in Seattle. Is like, oh no way, I'm in Seattle. And so the three of us got to talking and about what they wanted to interview me about and what they want to talk about. And I was like, wait, you guys, well, what's the point of this podcast? Do you even have a name? Well, we don't really have a name yet. And this is where I put on my thinking cap, my good old thinking cap. And I hope that you can visualize right now. I have my hands on my head, caressing my man bun. That is my thinking cap, and which that's also been a thing of the last year. I'm very fickle with my hair, and I kind of spontaneously do random things. And so the last year it's been growing out the hair, but just on the top of my head, which started as yeah, well, I've got curly hair. Maybe it'd be fun to have a little bit of a curly flop, which turned into, well, if I let it go for like another month, I might be able to put it into a bun. And I haven't really ever done that before. Why not? Which then turned into, well, that's a really weak looking bun there, Andrew. We know we can do better. And next thing you know, it's been like a year since I've cut the hair on the top of my head. I don't know. I'll probably spontaneously cut it off sometime this year. I don't know yet. I might dye it certain colors. I've had purple hair before. I've had blonde hair before. I don't know. My work doesn't really care for my day job what I do,
Right.
but I'm very
Well,
fickle.
well. So you got a lot of thinking going on, so you need a thinking cap.
Yes,
That's the
the thinking
reasoning.
cap.
Yeah.
The thinking cap. My lovely man bun thinking cap. And so, okay, so you guys, you want to start a podcast. You don't have a name. You don't really have a clear vision. You just know that you want to interview me. Who else do you want to interview? Uh, and I don't know if they had anybody. I think they just had this idea, this very basic idea, and they wanted to run with it. It's like, oh, and then I just started kicking into high gear of, okay, well, what if we did this? And what if we did this? And next thing you know, they're like, well, do you want to just co-host the whole podcast with us? And I remember sitting down with my in-laws and saying like, yeah, like I was invited to be on a podcast like at dinner one week, and a couple weeks later, I was like, yeah, so I think I'm starting a podcast. I'm not really sure how that happened, and I just trying to explain this to my in-laws, and they've been so great and supportive through all of this. Bless their souls. I really hope that they still like me after all of this. They do. They're wonderful. I could not be luckier to have the in-laws that I've got. But yeah, so it turned into, well, what do we want to name this, and what is the format we want to do? What are different segments we might want to play around with? Who do we want to interview to maybe launch? And so what we came up was the name Get Offset, with the idea of being, we want to offset the culture of the guitar community in positive and affirming ways. And the idea being is, we want to be a podcast that's not afraid to talk about the elephant in the room, but we also don't want to be like the quote unquote social justice warriors that just constantly ramble on about, or like go after people and just get super angry, like the caricature of someone who's just always upset and looking for some sort of something to be outraged over. And like, no, we want to be a podcast that is not just super upset about everything all the time and looking for something to be outraged about, but there's so much more here that we can be talking about, is talking about the companies that are super inclusive, that make sure that women and minorities are included in the community, that make sure that there's a safe place for all of us to talk and to express ourselves. And there's such a breadth to the music community that's just mind-boggling. And the folks that are doing a good job of fostering that sort of environment, the folks that are we've a couple of times now we've talked about some more sensitive subjects, and more of the, okay, well, just a heads up, we're going to get a little deep here. Bear with us. And we're not looking to provide answers to what it really comes down to is we're trying to start conversations. So let's have conversations about people who are doing great things in the industry. Let's have conversations, the more difficult conversations of like, hey, a company just did this. How do we feel about that? How do members of our community feel about that? How can we be doing better? Is kind of the bent that we ended up with for the idea of what we wanted to run with the podcast. So that was the quote unquote design stage. And so we got that together, and we interviewed Curtis Lamberton and Rick Matthews. Emily and I drove all the way out there from Seattle. They live out in the Tri-Cities. Matthews Effects is based out of Richland, and Lambertones is based out of Yakima. So that's a couple 3 hours away from us. So I left at like 6 a.m. and we didn't get back till nearly midnight for that day, and interviewed them both. And then we recorded recorded a pilot interview, and it took us like another 5 months to properly launch. There's a few family things that came up with between the three of us. I think each of us ended up having something that came up with family after we did those interviews that kind of pushed back the launch. We're in the process of building a website and getting together, getting approval for running ads and for being on Spotify and iTunes and getting all that cleared. It was just a heck of a process. And so we launched it was like end of October, early November, somewhere in there. And it was going on like 9 months of us working on the concept, and we were okay, we're going to do it this week. We're just going to make it happen. We launched, and I was shocked. We got some really positive and encouraging support right off the bat, week one. And by the end of the first month, I think our goal for the first year of running a podcast was to have 50 weekly listeners. I think we hit that within like the first month. It was just scared the everything out of me. I was like, whoa, I think maybe we've got something here. And right after we launched, unfortunately, Zach left the show. We're all friends, and we wish him the best. It was a combination of a couple different things, nothing personal. Love him to pieces, and so now it's down to just Emily and I, and we're kind of taking this and running with it and seeing where it goes.
Yeah. And so I remember when you guys started, how long ago was that? It was this last year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Sometime.
so this upcoming week is episode 23 for us, and we
Okay.
haven't missed a week, so that's 23 weeks.
So almost 6 months.
Getting there, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I tell you what, you guys did it everything the right way. compared to I remember when I started, I just like on a whim, on a weekend, sat down and recorded an episode and released it, and then it was like for the next 6 months I'm trying to straighten out the podcast and turn it into a show. So that's interesting, seeing you guys take it from a different angle. That's awesome though.
I definitely have to give Emily a huge ton of credit for the angle that we ended up going with, because she does marketing and for her day job, and has done a whole lot of stuff. A lot of the skills that she has professionally plays into how we chose to do this. But I think outside of the pragmatics of it, I think what really drove our decision making was this desire to want to do it right the first time and not screw this up.
Yeah.
Because there's a gravity. I mean, so me as a Christian, there's I'm familiar with the gravity of on a Sunday morning standing before the congregation and saying, all right, let's open up our Bibles, let's get into this, and the gravity of handling the Word of God. And I'm not going to say that the podcast is of the same gravity. I don't think it is. Just as a follower of Christ, I think the Bible carries so much, but it's nonetheless, it's this level of gravity of this is real stuff. What we talk about impacts real people, and specifically when we talk about the subject matter that deals with women and minorities, and me as a white guy, I mean, that don't affect me directly, but I know affect other people who don't have the same set of cards in life that I do. I got to make sure that I don't screw that up. But obviously, there's room for grace with that, but that's something that I take seriously, of wanting to make sure that we're holding things with an open hand and not trying to steamroll, but we're trying to listen. And I think that's played a huge part into how we've chosen our interview format, how we've chosen what subjects to tackle and what subjects to not tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a roundabout sort of way, that's filtered in the right kind of ways. I would like to say that everything we've done so far has been some part of a very well planned and well executed ruse by some professionals, and that's just not the case. There's a little bit of that, and there's been a couple of things that we've done that have been very professional, I think, and mostly on Emily's side of things. Like, she's the one that built the website and has done a whole lot of that kind of groundwork. She's been awesome with that. But I think there's something about what we're talking about and the attitude we're bringing to the table, I think, is what's resonating.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes me really excited to feel that people are listening and they're resonating with the content. And there's something really gratifying to that. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface of where this is going to go.
Well, talking about the show and everything, one of the things that comes to mind, something that you guys have done recently, is you guys did a collab with Spruce Effects.
Yeah.
And talk about that for just a second. And maybe, you've got a few of those left, so maybe if anybody's interested in those.
We do, yeah. So that's So I love the pedal to pieces, and Brian has been great with this. And I'm gonna humbly say that that's something that we put a whole lot of work into, and I think we could have better executed with just the way we launched and the way we've talked about it. And so I appreciate your kind words. I'm going to take a moment to be self-critical here of just reflecting on that. And so what we did was we collaborated with Brian, and we did a whole lot of work of designing the circuit and figuring out what we wanted it to be. We chose the name intentionally. We chose the circuit intentionally. The artwork is something that I did, so that's an example of some custom artwork that I've done, which is really handy that I learned how to do some basic graphic design stuff this last year with that in mind. But so we got this together, and we made 10 of them, and we got a demo going, and we've sold 6 out of 10 of them so far, which is super exciting. I think that's the current number. Brian can feel free to correct me when he listens to this. He can berate me later. But yeah, I think that's been a huge learning process for me. I think my expectations were set that we are going to sell all 10 of them in the first week, maybe 2 weeks tops. And the plan and the goal and the hope was that was going to be a way that we bring our community of listeners together. I think we're still heading that direction. I want this to be something that the owners of these units can hold on to and be a part of this group of folks that are Mount Hood owners. And kind of just pushing our way through that and continuing to build the experience of what it is to be a part of this community and a part of a group of people that care about the larger community. So with the unit itself is it's a fuzz and a boost. And so there's the Andrew side, which is me, and that's the boost, which is super fun. And it's a germanium treble booster, loosely based on the Rangemaster, which is my favorite boost unit of all time, which also happens to be Jamie Stillman's favorite boost of all time, if memory does serve right, who happens to be one of my favorite pedal builders in the community. He's the mastermind behind Earthquaker devices and does a lot of their circuit design. And on my list of folks that I want to shake hands with sometime soon. So that's the Andrew side. Germanium, because I've always loved germanium, and I like how unpredictable it can be and how fickle, and I like how that, yeah, I don't even know where to begin with how much I like germanium. So that's a very personal side for me on that level. And then we chose a triangle muff and modified the heck out of it. So there's only a couple of sounds on the Emily side that sound like a muff. It's a monster of a fuzz unit. Talk about the naming of the Mount Hood. If we could get just a little forward here for a second. So the history of the Big Muff is Mike Matthews started making it, I think it was in the 70s. And at that point in time, the term muff is a reference to a certain area of a woman's body. And that's something that when we were talking about naming a pedal and what we wanted to do with this design, the Kratos, not like it's a bad thing, but isn't it a little strange that we've just all kind of taken for granted that that's what the name of the unit is, and how it's just become the name that it's colloquially, there's a word, just that's what it's referred to. And I never associated that word with its original meaning. Oh, no, Mike Matthews that at the time, that obviously, and that was part of the whole shtick, pun intended. And so we wanted to have a little bit of fun with the name, and not like in a Mike Matthews shouldn't have done it, because that was a different era, and I don't honestly care. I just think it's funny that's the origin of the name. And so we thought we'd have a little bit of fun with it and in a weird sort of way reclaim it. And so we decided to go with a term that could refer to a part of multiple genders. and that I'll just let the mind run with that one a little bit. So we wanted the name of this muff circuit to be a little bit more gender neutral for those
Gotcha.
who wanted to really think about it. But if you just want it for the sake of the pedal, there's also it's the mount hood. Uh, so it's our fun little tongue in cheek. I love puns and I love wordplay, and hence the name of the podcast. There's so many layers to why we chose that name. Uh, and yeah, so that's just a little bit of a fun backstory on the naming of the pedal that I think is clever but also juvenile in its own way.
Yeah. Well, so they can find that pedal to go into Spruce Effects and find it there.
Yep, it's on the Spruce Effects website under the collaborations tab, and rumor has it there's going to be some more collaborations populating on that tab in the near future.
That is wow. I think people ought to be looking for that.
I
Definitely.
think they should,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, he's got a great just he does something special with his pedals, and especially with his germanium circuit that I
Oh
think is
yeah,
just something truly special.
no, I've had so much fun with the unit. So, for listening to this, I really hope we haven't sold out, and that information isn't outdated. Give us a shout if you're looking at dropping a little bit of money on something. Consider supporting a small time podcast and also supporting Brian because he's a great guy. Brian is the guy who runs Spruce Effects, and I would be 100% behind giving my money to him and his business.
Yeah, he's
So
he's he's amazing. Well, I have had a just a really cool time getting to kind of talk with you about different segments of your journey when it comes from talking about starting playing music and how that gravitated towards guitar and then pedals and then pedal graphic toppers and then the podcast and uh, it's so multifaceted, kind of your story and I want to invite our listeners to go check out Get Offset and check out the pedal collab you guys are doing and it's just a also tell us about your new website coming up and when it should be soon, right?
well, yes. Working on a website for FoxChirho. It's my plan was to have it up beginning of this month, and that's been one of those I want to make sure I do it right the first
Totally.
time kind of deals. And so I'm taking my time, and I'm really hoping I'm not losing too many folks along for the ride. But I want to make sure that when this does launch, it goes right. And my goal is by the end of this month, I want to at least have a portion of the website functional for folks to start putting in orders.
Awesome.
Um, but yeah, I'm really excited with how some of the photo shoots I've done for some of the content have turned out. I'm really liking how the flow of the website's coming together, and just overall, I'm really excited for this thing to launch and to enter into the next chapter of the business of FoxChirho and getting pedal toppers out for folks to use.
Very cool.
So,
So be on the lookout for that website, and it should go live here not too much longer after this episode's published. And so, um, well, awesome, man. I'm so glad that I know you got a lot of things going on, and just thank you for your time to come on and just tell us a little bit about your story and
yeah,
yeah.
thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I like I said, but there's it's hard for me to put together a flow of what the journey is. So I hope it wasn't too nebulous, and I hope I was able to make it a little exciting for you there.
Well, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing what happens with the pedal toppers and the podcasts, and just encourage everybody go check those things out.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.